He first wave hit without warning. It started as a shimmer in the sky, barely noticeable to anyone who wasn't looking. Then, with a terrifying rumble, the X-Cyrax warships descended, massive, sleek, and unlike anything humanity had ever seen. They didn't announce their arrival, they didn't declare war. They simply came with the overwhelming force of an unstoppable storm. Within moments, the world's communications grid went dark. Military satellites blinked out of existence, and every major city on Earth was plunged into chaos. Airplanes fell from the sky as air traffic control systems failed. Power grids shut down. Governments scrambled to respond, but the Exurax didn't care for politics. They cared only for conquest. In Washington, D.C., the White House was incinerated in the blink of an eye, a massive blast of energy erasing it from the face of the earth. In London, the iconic skyline crumbled as a wave of destructive fire rained down from above. The people of Earth, used to being the dominant force on their planet, were helpless like ants before a boot. The world's military forces attempted to retaliate, launching everything from nukes to fighter jets, but nothing worked. The Exurax were simply too advanced, too powerful. Hargrave watched the horror unfold from a secure military base in Nevada, surrounded by the remnants of what was once a powerful force. His face was drawn, his eyes hard, as he surveyed the battlefield. He had seen failure before, but never like this. The human race had spent centuries preparing for war, accumulating weapons, perfecting technology, building alliances, but nothing had prepared them for the reality of the Exurax. The Exurax's ships, black as midnight, hovered over the ruins of major cities. They weren't just invaders, they were predators. The alien vessels emitted a low hum that seemed to resonate through the very air, and the ground quaked beneath their colossal size. Out of them poured waves of soldiers, alien creatures clad in metallic armor, their forms too strange to comprehend. Some had multiple limbs, others were more machine than flesh. Their eyes glowed with a cold, merciless intelligence. The invaders wasted no time. They eradicated resistance with ease, laying waste to entire armies and forcing governments to surrender without question. Hargrave's heart sank as he saw the footage on the command center screens. The military had been obliterated, cities burned to the ground, and human casualties climbed into the billions in mere hours. The alien forces had only one goal: total domination. They captured Earth's leadership, leaving the world's people paralyzed. No one could stand against them. Yet, in the midst of all this destruction, something unexpected happened. A signal, weak and flickering, appeared on the screen. It was a distress call, originating from deep within the underground bunkers of Cheyenne Mountain. It was a rallying cry from an unlikely hero, General William Hargrave. With the full force of humanity's will, Hargrave stood before a wall of flickering lights and chaotic static. "This is General Hargrave." His voice boomed across the remnants of Earth's military networks. "If you can hear this, the fight is not over. We will fight. We will adapt. We will rise again." A flicker of hope sparked across the globe. The military may have fallen, but humanity's spirit had not. The human race had been caught by surprise, but it would not surrender without a fight. Hargrave, standing amidst the broken remnants of Earth's once proud defenses, made one thing clear: humanity would survive. They had no choice but to rise, because their world was on the brink of annihilation, and only they could stop it. The resistance began with a whisper. It wasn't a grand army, not yet. It wasn't even an official movement. It was scattered groups of survivors, hiding in the ruins of cities, clinging to hope where none existed. They had no clear leader, no unified command, only one thing in common: the refusal to lie down and die. Earth's most brilliant minds, its engineers, scientists, and military tacticians, now joined in this underground war for survival. General Hargrave, once part of a mighty global military command, now found himself leading this new, disparate force from the shadows. He knew they couldn't match the Exurax in strength, but they had something the invaders did not: the human will to survive, to fight, to innovate. Dr. Elena Torres, a former weapons scientist with a sharp mind and an unbreakable spirit, became Hargrave's most trusted ally. She had been working on human defense technologies before the invasion, studying everything from advanced AI to quantum communication. With Earth's infrastructure collapsing around her, she quickly realized the key to humanity's survival didn't lie in brute strength or sheer firepower. It lay in adaptation. "What the Axarax don't understand about us," Taurus said to Hargrave in a dimly lit command center, "is that we adapt faster than any species in the galaxy. They think they've crushed us. What they don't know is we can learn faster than they can conquer." It was this idea that fueled the plan. Torres had been analyzing the wreckage of Axirax ships, extracting bits of their technology, and attempting to understand their neural networks. The key was in their communication systems. If they could learn how to disrupt the neural link that connected the Axirax fleet, they could at least level the playing field. Hargrave agreed with her instincts, but it was a race against time. The Axirax, who had no patience for failure, were already hunting down any remaining pockets of resistance across the globe. The human forces had been whittled down to a few hundred survivors in isolated locations. Yet the fight wasn't over, not as long as there were humans willing to take up arms. The breakthrough came when Torres discovered an encrypted file deep within the wreckage of a downed Syrax warship, a file detailing their neural control system. The alien invaders relied on a complex network that allowed them to control their warships, weapons, and even their soldiers. If that network could be hacked, it would leave them vulnerable. It wasn't an easy task. The network was designed to be nearly unbreakable, with layers of alien encryption, but Torres was determined. Every waking hour, she pored over the data, working with a team of experts, trying to crack the code that would allow them to disable the Axirax's military advantage. Meanwhile, Hargrave and his team launched small, precision raids. These were guerrilla attacks. No large armies, just groups of 10 to 20 soldiers striking key Axirax facilities, planting explosives, and stealing any technology they could use. These raids were risky, often ending in casualties, but each one sent a message to the invaders. Earth was not done fighting. One such raid in the ruins of Chicago marked a pivotal moment in the rebellion. The team was able to sabotage an Axirax energy core, plunging a large portion of the city into darkness. It wasn't much, but it was enough to prove that humanity could still outsmart their conquerors. The humans weren't just fighting back with brute force. They were using their minds, their creativity, their stubbornness. Then came the breakthrough. Torres had cracked the encryption. The next morning, Hargrave gathered his remaining commanders in an underground bunker. They just received word that the Axirax had launched a retaliatory strike on another human stronghold. The invaders were growing impatient, and soon they'd likely wipe out what little resistance was left. But now humanity had an edge. Hargrave stood before them, a renewed fire in his eyes. "We hit them where it hurts. Torres has the key to their neural systems. If we can get close enough to one of their ships and deploy the virus, we can disable their fleet. This is our chance to strike." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of their collective decision heavy in the air. Then, one by one, the commanders nodded, each of them knowing the risks. They had no choice. The humans were outmatched in every way, but one thing was clear: if they didn't fight back now, they would never get another chance. The war had just begun. Hargrave's strategy was simple but perilous. Strike fast, strike hard, and exploit the Axirax overconfidence. The plan was to take one of their key warships, install the virus that would cripple their neural systems, and return to their base of operations before they even realized what had happened. It was a risky gambit. No one knew how well the Axirax defenses would respond, but it was humanity's only shot at creating real disruption. The team, Hargrave, Torres, and a select group of the most skilled soldiers, set out at dusk. The target was a colossal Axirax transport ship anchored above a remote desert region in the American Southwest. It was a resupply vessel, surrounded by a smaller fleet of Axirax fighters and drones, seemingly unguarded by the kind of massive weaponry that the larger ships carried. If there was a time to strike, It was now. The resistance team moved under cover of night, each soldier equipped with modified alien technology they had scavenged from previous skirmishes. Their primary objective was infiltration, not destruction, getting close enough to the ship's neural interface to upload the virus without being detected. As they approached the vessel, Hargrave's heart pounded. The Xerax didn't know they were coming, but their ship's automated defenses were still a constant threat. A misstep, a single wrong move, and they would all be dead. When they were just a few hundred yards from the transport ship, a hum filled the air. The Xerax drones, sleek and insect-like, began to patrol the perimeter. Hargrave motioned for the team to crouch behind a cluster of rocks. The drones, armed with devastating energy weapons, passed by with unnerving precision, scanning the landscape for any signs of life. Torres, ever the scientist, was calm in the chaos. She worked quickly, connecting her makeshift device to the alien communication network. "I'm in," she whispered. "The virus is uploading now. We've got about 5 minutes before they detect us." Hargrave nodded. 5 minutes. He glanced around, mentally counting the seconds as his pulse quickened. Every second they stayed in the open was a risk, but moving too early would mean detection and certain death. Then, just as Torres initiated the final phase of the upload, the unexpected happened. A signal flared from the ship's central tower, a direct transmission from the Xerax fleet. The virus wasn't quite ready to take full effect, but it was enough to trigger a security alert. The drones immediately turned and began to scan the area more aggressively. Hargrave's instincts kicked in, and he barked orders. "Move. Now." The humans sprinted toward the ship's underside, narrowly avoiding detection by a drone that zipped overhead. They entered the lower maintenance levels of the ship, their footsteps echoing in the metallic corridors. Hargrave had been in dozens of enemy strongholds before, but this felt different. The walls here seemed to pulse with energy, as if the ship itself were alive. Torres worked feverishly, using a hybrid of human and Xerax technology to infiltrate the ship's core systems. The virus was now spreading, a digital storm coursing through the ship's network. But there was no time to wait and see if it would succeed. They needed to leave before the full impact of the virus took hold. The ship shook as a massive explosion rang out in the distance. Hargrave's comms unit crackled to life. "General, they're coming. The fleet's on alert. We've got incoming reinforcements." It was now or never. Hargrave ordered a retreat. But the escape was anything but easy. Iraq soldiers, alerted to their presence, closed in from all sides. The team fought back with ferocity, their weapons lighting up the dark corridors as they gunned down alien soldiers in a desperate bid to break free. Torres, still focused on the mission, gritted her teeth as she checked the progress of the virus. "It's almost there. Just a few more seconds." A violent explosion shook the entire vessel, and the lights flickered. The virus had hit the heart of the ship's neural system, and the effects were instantaneous. The Xerax's automated defenses shut down, and the ship's systems went into disarray. The soldiers who were pursuing them hesitated, unsure of what had just happened. In that moment of confusion, Hargrave and his team made their break. They raced back to the surface, where a stolen Xerax fighter waited. The ship's systems were in chaos, and no one had the time to chase them down. As they lifted off, Hargrave looked out at the crippled transport ship in the distance. The Xerax fleet was now a disorganized mess, the massive warships, once imposing figure, now a sitting target. It had worked. They had done it. The humans had struck the first real blow against their alien oppressors. But as the team soared into the sky, Hargrave knew the battle was far from over. This victory, however hard-earned, was only the beginning. The Xerax would retaliate, and the fight for Earth was far from won. Still, for the first time since the invasion began, he allowed himself to hope. Humanity had a chance after all. The victory at the Xerax transport ship should have been a turning point. The virus had crippled one of their warships, sending shockwaves through the invaders' ranks. For a brief moment, it seemed like humanity had finally found a way to hit back to disrupt the seemingly unstoppable alien force. But victory is never without its cost. General Hargrave stood before a map of the Resistance's scattered strongholds in an underground command center, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. The map blinked with the locations of their remaining cells, the red lights flashing ominously as the extracts were closing in on each one. Every hour that passed seemed to push them closer to extinction. The extracts had learned from the disruption, and they were methodical in their retaliation. "We need to strike again," Hargrave said, his voice firm, but the strain was apparent. He turned to Dr. Elena Torres, who had been working tirelessly on further developing the virus. "Can we replicate the virus on a larger scale? We need to hit their fleets, their supply chains. We can't let them regroup." Torres didn't answer immediately. Her brow furrowed in concentration, and then, finally, she looked up. "I think I can. I'll need time, though. They're already tightening their defenses. It'll take more than just the virus. We'll need to hit them in ways they won't expect." Hargrave nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He knew they were running out of time. However, what Hargrave didn't know was that a shadow was creeping inside the ranks of the Resistance, a betrayal that would threaten everything they had fought for. It came from someone he trusted, someone close, a member of his inner circle. Commander Lucas Voss had been with Hargrave from the beginning. A veteran of the old military campaigns, he was a sharp strategist, cool under pressure. He had been instrumental in organizing their resistance efforts, leading raids on Iraq's positions with ruthless efficiency. No one questioned his loyalty. No one suspected a thing. But in the dead of night, as the rest of the resistance slept, Voss met in secret with Iraq's emissary in a remote bunker. Hargrave had always believed that the Iraqs would never negotiate, that their ruthless conqueror mindset would never allow for peace. But that night, Voss proved him wrong. "I've given them everything they need," Voss whispered, his eyes darting nervously. "The access codes, the plans for our next strike, the location of Dr. Torres' lab. It's all set. The Iraqs will grant me a position of power. I'll be a king among them. And once I'm in, we'll end this war." The emissary, a tall, cloaked figure with glowing eyes, nodded approvingly. "The Iraqs will honor our agreement. Once Earth falls, you will have dominion over its survivors." Voss, his hands shaking with anticipation, nodded back. "You'll have the virus codes and the key to the central hub. I'll give it to you when the time's right." But as Voss and the emissary parted ways, one thing was clear. The deal had been struck. The traitor's betrayal was complete. Hargrave, the one person who had trusted him above all others, would never see the knife coming. Hours later, the attack came. It was supposed to be another routine raid, a strike on a small Iraq supply outpost in the outskirts of Denver. Hargrave had given the orders, and Voss, as the operations commander, had led the charge. But as the human forces neared the target, something was wrong. The Iraqs had been waiting for them. The ambush was swift. The humans were surrounded by a force much larger than expected. The resistance fighters fought back fiercely, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. Hargrave and Torres barely escaped with their lives, but the rest of the team was wiped out in minutes. Voss's plan had worked. He had betrayed them to the Iraqs, ensuring that humanity's most critical operation would fail. And as the team escaped through the wreckage, Hargrave realized the painful truth. Someone had sold them out. Back at their hidden base, Hargrave gathered what remained of the resistance in a makeshift war room. The weight of his failure hung heavy in the air. He turned to Torres, his voice barely above a whisper. "Someone tipped them off. Someone knew exactly where we were going, and I think I know who it is." Torres, looking at him with a mixture of anger and disbelief, nodded grimly. "We've got a traitor in our midst." Hargrave clenched his fists. The sting of betrayal cut deeper than any Iraq's blade ever could. In this war, they had counted on trust, and it had been shattered. But there was no time to mourn. The Iraqs were closing in, and now the resistance had one more enemy to face, someone from within their own ranks. They would have to act quickly to uncover the traitor before all was lost. The mood in the resistance's underground command center was grim. Hargrave paced back and forth, his mind racing. His hands were trembling, his face drawn with exhaustion. Voss had betrayed them. There was no doubt anymore. The ambush, the way the Exarax had been waiting for them, it all pointed to one thing. But how had Voss pulled it off? What was his endgame? And most importantly, how could they stop him before he led them all to ruin? Torres sat at a console, her eyes scanning through encrypted communications that might reveal Voss's involvement. She was exhausted too, but determination burned in her eyes. Hargrave, we need to move quickly. If Voss has made his deal with the Exarax, we need to stop him before he gives them anything else. But to do that, we need proof. Hargrave stopped pacing and turned to face her. We don't have much time. That Exarax won't waste another chance to wipe us out. We need to find him now. We can't let him destroy everything we've built. The next few hours were spent combing through every piece of data they had. Communications, movements, schedules. Hargrave ordered a full sweep of the remaining resistance bases to look for any sign of sabotage or leaks. The betrayal ran deeper than they had anticipated. Every move they made seemed to lead them back to Voss. At the same time, the Exarax were making their move. Hargrave received reports that the aliens had begun consolidating their forces, preparing for a final push. The virus, which had once held promise, was no longer their greatest weapon. Now it was the traitor in their midst. The longer they waited, the closer Voss's deal with the Exarax would be to fruition. Then, Torres discovered something that sent a chill down her spine. Hidden in the code of a recent transmission was an encrypted message, a message that had come from Voss. She immediately decrypted it, revealing an exchange between him and the Exarax emissary. Tonight, the virus is ready, Voss had written. I'll deliver the data and give you access to the central hub as promised. The resistance is fractured. There's no turning back now. Hargrave's jaw clenched in anger. Voss had been planning this all along, feeding them false intel, sabotaging their efforts from within. And now the Exarax would have everything they needed to destroy humanity once and for all. Torres turned to Hargrave, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. He's going to give them the central hub. If they get access to that, they can override every defense we have left. There will be no stopping them. Hargrave's mind raced. If Voss followed through with his betrayal, humanity's last hope would be gone. The Exarax would control Earth's entire technological infrastructure, making any form of resistance impossible. The war they had fought for so long would be over. We can't let him leave, Hargrave said, his voice low and cold. We need to stop him before he hands over that data. If we can capture him, we can reverse the damage he's done. But capturing Voss wasn't going to be easy. He had already covered his tracks, disappearing into the shadows with a small group of loyalists. Hargrave knew they had to act fast, and they had to strike without hesitation. Hargrave and Torres assembled a small team of the most trusted resistance fighters, those who hadn't been compromised, and set out under the cover of darkness. Their target was one of the last remaining Exarax outposts, where Voss was supposed to meet the alien emissary. The stakes couldn't be higher. If they failed, humanity would fall. But if they succeeded, they could put an end to the betrayal and take back their future. As they approached the outpost, Hargrave's heart raced. Voss was close. Too close. The location was familiar, a place where they had launched several successful raids in the past, but now it was crawling with Exarax guards. The traitor's plan had come to fruition, but the resistance wasn't backing down. They moved quickly, silently, harsh whispers filling the air as Hargrave led them through the rocky terrain. They reached the outskirts of the compound and watched from a distance. Voss was there, speaking with the Exarax emissary, his face cold, his hands gesturing with purpose. He was about to complete his treason. Hargrave signaled for the team to move into position. "This is it," he whispered. "We hit them hard, we take Voss alive." The plan was simple: surround the compound, neutralize the guards, and capture Voss before he could deliver the virus to the Exarax. But as they prepared to strike, something unexpected happened. Voss glanced up, his eyes meeting Hargrave's in the shadows. He smiled. "It's too late, General," Voss called out into the night. You should have known better than to trust me." And with that, the Exarax forces descended upon them in a flurry of chaos. Their trap sprung. The betrayal was complete. The moment Voss's smug smile met Hargrave's gaze, the battlefield erupted into chaos. The traitor had known they were coming. The Exarax forces, waiting just beyond the shadows, swarmed the compound with terrifying precision, their sleek armor gleaming in the moonlight. Hargrave's heart sank as the sound of alien war cries pierced the air. He had walked straight into a trap. "Fall back," Hargrave barked, his voice cutting through the panic. His team began to scatter, diving into cover as the first wave of Exarax soldiers charged forward, their blaster rifles blazing. The resistance fighters were outnumbered, but they were experienced, tough, resilient, and willing to die for a chance to win. Hargrave dove behind a low ridge, narrowly avoiding a burst of plasma that singed the earth where he had just been standing. His mind was racing. They had underestimated Voss. They had been too focused on stopping the alien fleet, too desperate to trust anyone. Now they were fighting for survival. Torres, crouched behind a nearby boulder, began to return fire, her modified human weapons cutting down the first few advancing Exarax soldiers. Her expression was one of quiet fury, but Hargrave knew she was just as stunned by the betrayal as he was. Their best strategist, their most trusted ally, had sold them out. "Voss!" Hargrave shouted, his voice carrying over the noise of the battle. "This doesn't have to end like this. You're making a mistake." Voss didn't respond. Instead, he turned, walking toward the heart of the compound, where the emissary waited. The Exarax were closing in on them, and the resistance was falling back as quickly as they could, retreating toward the cliffs where they could escape. But Hargrave wasn't going to let it end this way. Not without a fight. "We've got one chance," Hargrave said, turning to Torres. "We need to get to the control center. If we can stop him from uploading the virus, we might still have time to reverse this. It's now or never." Torres nodded, her face hard with determination. "Agreed. Let's move." The two of them broke cover, sprinting toward the compound's central structure. Exarax soldiers were closing in from every side, but they were disorganized, distracted by the chaos. The resistance was in full retreat, fighting for their lives, and that was the opening they needed. They reached the control center doors, only to find them locked tight. Hargrave slammed his fist against the reinforced metal, cursing. The Exarax had secured the building from all sides. "We need to force our way in," Torres said, kneeling to inspect the door's locking mechanism. "If I can get the access panel open, I can override the controls, but it's going to take a minute." "Do it," Hargrave ordered, his voice tight with urgency. "We don't have much time." As Torres worked, Hargrave stood watch, keeping an eye out for any signs of the Exarax reinforcements. Their numbers were growing. He could hear their alien war machines getting closer, their heavy boots pounding the earth like an unstoppable wave. Moments later, Torres looked up. "I've got it. Get ready." Without waiting for a response, she pressed a button on her wristband, triggering a series of low-frequency pulses that emitted from the control panel. The doors creaked and then, with a resounding metallic groan, they slid open. Inside, the central hub was abuzz with activity. The Exarax emissary stood at a large console, his hands flying across alien keys, preparing to launch the virus and ensure humanity's final defeat. Voss was by his side, his expression cold, his hands folded behind his back as he watched the destruction unfold. "Voss!" Hargrave's voice thundered as he and Torres burst into the room, weapons drawn. "Stop what you're doing. This ends now." The emissary turned, his glowing eyes narrowing, but Voss didn't even flinch. He simply turned to face Hargrave, a look of cold indifference on his face. "It's over, General," Voss said, his voice steady, almost bored. "You never understood. The Exarax are the future of this world. You and your petty resistance were just a delay, a momentary inconvenience. But now I have a place among them. I'll be more than you ever were. And soon, Earth will belong to them." Hargrave's blood boiled. He wanted to rush forward and end it right there, but he knew better. They needed to stop the virus, not kill the traitor. As much as the urge for vengeance burned inside him, they still had one chance to save humanity. "Don't be a fool, Voss," Torres shouted, her voice desperate. "You're giving them everything. The virus will destroy us all. You've made a deal with monsters who will never keep their word." Voss's eyes flashed. "It's too late. I've already won." Before Hargrave could respond, the emissary triggered a series of alarms. The control room hummed to life, and the walls trembled as the extracts initiated their final phase. The virus was almost deployed. Hargrave made a split-second decision. He dashed forward, knocking aside a group of Actarax soldiers in his path. Torres was right behind him, her gun blazing, buying him just enough time. In that moment, everything seemed to slow down. Hargrave reached the console and slammed his fist on the key panel, desperate to stop the launch. But Voss was already moving, his hand flying toward a detonator. The room erupted into chaos as Hargrave lunged, a final attempt to stop the destruction of Earth and his own betrayal. But it was too late. Hargrave stood on the edge of the command center's balcony, looking out over the sprawling city below. The remnants of the Battle of the Exirax compound had left a scar on the landscape. Explosions and gunfire had torn through the night, but the resistance had held strong, barely. They had been forced to abandon their main base, retreating into the shadows, but they were still alive. They had one final chance. The mood of the command center was grim, but not hopeless. Hargrave had always believed in the spirit of humanity's fight, but this time, something felt different. The Extarax had learned from their mistakes. They had regrouped, reinforced their forces, and now they were preparing for their final assault. Earth was about to become their new home, whether the resistance liked it or not. The betrayal of Commander Voss still stung, but Hargrave couldn't afford to let it consume him. Voss was in custody now, but there was no time for justice. There was only time for survival. Dr. Torres stood beside him, her eyes scanning the map of Earth's major cities displayed on a screen in front of them. "They're converging on our last strongholds," she said quietly, tapping the screen. "The Exirax are using everything they have. It won't be long before they find us again." "We'll make our stand here," Hargrave replied, his voice firm. "This city. We've got enough resources to put up a fight, and we can't afford to keep running." "But we're outnumbered," Torres pointed out. "The Exirax have superior technology, their numbers are overwhelming, and we've already lost so many. We can't win this the way we fought before." Hargrave turned to face her, his expression hardening. "Maybe not the same way, but we still have something they don't." Torres raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "We have the will to fight. We're human, and we've always survived against impossible odds. If the Exirax think they can break us, they're about to learn the hard way how wrong they are." He glanced at the rest of the room, where the remaining members of the resistance were gathered, each face weary but resolute. Despite everything, despite the losses and the betrayal, there was something in their eyes, a fire that hadn't been extinguished. It was the same fire that had fueled their defiance from the beginning. "We've been fighting this war in their terms," Hargrave continued, rallying the troops. "But we don't need to play by their rules anymore. We're going to turn the tide. The Extarax have underestimated us. They think they can wipe us out in one final blow. But they don't know what humanity is capable of when cornered." "We've got a new plan, then?" asked Sergeant Bennett, one of Hargrave's most trusted officers. "Because I don't think we're going to last long with just our usual hit-and-run tactics." "We're not just going to survive," Hargrave said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "We're going to make them bleed. We've got something that Extarax don't, an intimate knowledge of this world. We know the land, we know the people. We've got guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and the will to fight. And now we have the knowledge to hit them where it hurts." Hargrave turned to Torres. "I want everything we've learned about their tech, their weaknesses, and most importantly, their supply lines. If we can disrupt their logistics, we can slow them down. And that gives us a chance." Torres nodded. "We've been developing new tactics, but we need to act fast. They're getting closer every hour. We have to hit them hard and fast before they realize what we're doing." Hargrave turned back to the group, his voice gaining strength with every word. Listen up. We've been pushed to the edge. The Xerax think they've already won. But I'm telling you now, we're not done. Not by a long shot. A cheer rippled through the room, a surge of energy that spread through the tired faces around him. Hargrave could feel the tide turning. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Humanity was about to take its last stand, and they weren't going to go down quietly. The plan was set into motion immediately. The resistance fighters, led by Hargrave, split into specialized units. Some would take out critical Xerax communication hubs, cutting off their ability to coordinate. Others would target their fuel supplies, while a select group would infiltrate deep into Xerax territory to sabotage the command centers. Torres worked tirelessly to refine the virus, ensuring that if the resistance needed one final strike, they would have it. As Hargrave and his team set out, the atmosphere was tense, but there was no fear in their hearts, only resolve. The fight had begun to feel less like a battle for survival and more like a war of ideals. The Xerax might have their technology, their superior strength, but humanity had something they couldn't comprehend: the desire to protect everything they held dear. And they would fight with everything they had, no matter the cost. The resistance had been cornered. Now they were about to show the Xerax that even in their final hour, humanity would never be a species that could simply be erased. The dawn of the final day was a strange and eerie one. The Xerax forces had encircled what remained of the Resistance's stronghold, their vast war machines and heavily fortified positions promising annihilation. They believed the war was over. Humanity had been crushed, its last defenses broken, but the Resistance had one final trick up their sleeves. Hargrave stood at the front of the Resistance's makeshift command post, overlooking the battlefield below. The city lay in ruins, its towering structures now crumbling skeletons of the past. The Xerax had already begun their assault on the last pockets of resistance, but Hargrave knew that the real battle wasn't going to be fought in the open. It would be fought from the shadows, using every last resource and every ounce of cunning humanity had left. "Are we ready?" Hargrave asked, turning to Dr. Torres, who was hunched over a terminal, scanning through the final phase of their plan. Torres nodded, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. "The virus is in place. We've hacked their comms, disrupted their supply lines, and triggered multiple failsafes. If they try to launch a full-scale assault, we'll make them bleed. And if we fail?" Torres looked at him, her eyes hard. "Then Earth falls. But we're not going to fail. Not today." The weight of the situation was pressing down on him. They had fought for years to get to this point, to this final stand. It was their last chance to tip the scales in humanity's favor. But there were no guarantees. They would be outnumbered, outgunned, and with no reinforcements coming. Everything was riding on the success of the plan. Everything. "Everyone's in position?" Hargrave asked, his voice low. "Almost," Sergeant Bennett replied, his face grim. "But there's one thing I don't get. We've been hitting their weak points, disrupting their supply chains, but what happens if the Xerax figure out what we're doing and retaliate? We're running out of time." "That's the gamble," Hargrave said, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We have to force their hand. We hit them with everything we've got, hit hard and fast, before they can regroup. We need them to underestimate us one last time." Bennett looked doubtful but didn't argue. The resistance fighters were ready for this final push, even if they were fighting with the knowledge that it might not be enough. "Then let's make it count," Bennett said, and the room fell into a charged silence. Every person in that room knew that this was their last stand. The Xerax were moving in. Their massive war machines were coming closer, their weapons powered up, ready for the final siege. The time for subtlety was over. Hargrave's plan was a risk, but there was no other option. The Resistance's final assault was swift, brutal, and unexpected. Hargrave's team infiltrated the heart of the Xerax forces, launching a series of coordinated strikes that crippled their defensive systems. Explosions rang out as enemy turrets fell silent and key structures were reduced to rubble. The Resistance had done the unthinkable. They had forced the Xerax on the back foot, creating chaos within their ranks. Meanwhile, Torres was in the heart of the operation, coordinating the virus. It had been years in the making, an intricate digital weapon that would tear through the Exarax's systems, causing widespread disruption. The virus had been designed to exploit the Exarax's reliance on a central control network. Once Taurus triggered it, it would send their weapons offline, collapse their shields, and disable the communication channels they depended on. Hargrave fought his way through the chaos, rallying his troops and leading them into the heart of the Exarax command center. The alien forces, stunned by the sudden resistance, struggled to regroup. Their massive war machines faltered, their once impenetrable shields flickering and failing. The tide was shifting. Then the final piece of their plan fell into place. The virus activated. Within moments, the Exarax's entire infrastructure collapsed. Their communication lines were severed and their fleet began to crumble. Their once unstoppable war machines stopped dead in their tracks, their energy systems shutting down one by one. It was over. But even in victory, there was no triumph in Hargrave's heart. The city was burning. The survivors, though victorious, had paid an unimaginable price. The Exarax had been pushed back, but the cost of the battle was steep. Hargrave collapsed to his knees, exhaustion overtaking him. His body ached, his mind hazy with the overwhelming weight of what had just transpired. They had won, but at what cost? The landscape around them was a graveyard, and the war had left humanity scarred. "General," a voice said softly. Hargrave looked up to see Taurus standing over him, her face bruised and battered but filled with relief. "It's over. We did it." Hargrave nodded slowly, feeling the gravity of her words settle over him. The war was over. Humanity had survived. Against all odds, they had beaten the Exarax. But as the dust began to settle, and the first rays of a new day broke through the smoke-filled sky, Hargrave couldn't help but wonder, what kind of world would they rebuild from the ashes? What would it mean to rise from this, and how would humanity move forward, knowing they had defeated an alien superpower, but at the cost of everything they had once known? The fight for survival had ended. Now the fight to rebuild had begun.